Hey, welcome back to Under Further Review. This is by no means a new episode. This is more of an instant reaction to the penalties given to Michigan today after, 2 years of distress for the program and uncertainty about what was going to happen. Michigan finally has an answer. Now they can focus on their 2025 season, August. So this is accurate in some ways, but boy, did the NCAA take their sweet time like they usually do. It took over 2 years to finally come up with a decision. A lot of back and forth, a lot of information thrown out there. Sometimes the sources were accurate, sometimes they were a little fluffed up, I would say. But whether you stand on Michigan's side or not, this is the solution. This is what the NCAA felt was appropriate in the current landscape of football. Of course, there were reports out there that were saying that, the college football or the NCAA committee felt like since this is a new times for college football, that it wasn't appropriate to give them a postseason ban, especially since most of the coaching staff is new outside of, Sherrone Moore and maybe one or two others. And the entire roster is completely new. So it didn't really make sense to the NCAA to punish the current team. They were kind of saying we could have done it if we wanted to. And they had enough information or findings to do it. But instead, there's penalties out there. Pete Thamel of ESPN posted them, so I'm going to read it off of there, and I'll post it on the screen here. The prescribed penalties for the parties who contested their violations in this case are as followed: 4 years probation, financial penalties. The financial penalties can get a little confusing, and I don't know if they're 100% confirmed because a lot is based on what is made over the 25 and 26 seasons. So it's going to be over 20 million, but according to Pete Thamel, it can get above 30 million at one point. So, it's a hefty fine for any university out there. So the financial penalties are 50,000 fine plus 10% of the budget for the football program. A fine equivalent to the anticipated loss of all postseason competition revenue sharing associated with the 2025 and 26 football seasons, a fine equivalent to the cost of 10% of the scholarships awarded in Michigan's football program for the 25-26 academic season, a 25% reduction in football official visits during the 25-26 season, a 14-week prohibition on recruiting communications in the football program during the probation period, for Connor Stalions, who was the low staffer that just became so popular during this time and has done a bunch of interviews and is pretty vocal on social media. His Twitter page, you can check it out. An 8-year show cause order restricted him from all athletically related activities during the show cause period. So something they don't throw in there is he can actually serve a 1-year suspension, and this is the same with Harbaugh. And I believe he can go back to coaching after that during the show cause. If not, he just does the 8 years and he can come back no problem right away. For Jim Harbaugh, it's a 10-year show cause order restricting him from all athletically related activities during the show cause period, which will begin on August 7th, 2028, at the conclusion of his 4-year show cause order from a previous case. Denard Robinson, who's the legendary quarterback who became coach for the Michigan program, a 3-year show cause order restricting him from athletically related activities during the show cause period. And then Sherrone Moore, who's the current head coach, a 2-year show cause order during which he is suspended from a total of 3 games. Michigan self-imposed a 2-game suspension for Moore during the upcoming 25-26 football season, and we all know he's not going to be doing the Oklahoma game, or he's not going to be serving his suspension during the Oklahoma game. He'll be serving it during Nebraska in the following week. So I believe Moore coached originally at Oklahoma, so it's a bit of a homecoming, and it's going to be two top 25 teams, so a moneymaker for college football as well, the NCAA. The panel determined that the suspension for one additional game was appropriate. Therefore, Moore also will be suspended for the first game of the 26-27 season. Apart from the 3-game suspension, Moore is not prohibited from engaging in coaching or other athletically related activities during the show cause period. So let's talk about this a little bit. So Michigan, some people believe they received a slap on the wrist in some ways. Some people were waiting for the hammer. Maybe this is in some people's minds the hammer that they were waiting for, but I would say most people wanted the postseason ban and um, the vacated wins. So Michigan gets to hold on to all of their Big Ten championships. They get to hold on to their national championship. And they get, if they do make the postseason this year, they still get to play, which is a huge win for that athletic department because in recruiting terms, if you get that 2 year postseason ban, especially for players who are upperclassmen or will be leaving after 2 years, this is huge because I really think that mass exit that we were all thinking might happen if Michigan really did receive the hammer. I do believe if they receive the postseason ban, you would see some players leave because that's the ultimate goal. Outside of this current NIL landscape that we have now, the current times of football where it's a money hungry institution and the players found out that they could get paid and there's not really any restrictions behind what they can get paid. We saw that with Bryce Underwood in some ways. I do believe that outside of making their money while they can and while they're a hot commodity and you don't know what's going to happen in the NFL or if you even make the NFL or professional football or God forbid an injury ever happens, so the players are rightfully making money based off of their names. But I mean that's probably part one, but part two's got to be playing in that national championship game or making the playoff or having a chance even. We see it every year where players, once they see that they're out of the running for the playoff, you start to see some of them start to drop off and start thinking about the NFL draft in some ways. Um, Unfortunately, Michigan saw that, especially during the bowl season when they played Alabama. But I give props to a lot of those players like Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and Colson Loveland. They stuck around the team until the last possible second. Of course, Loveland didn't play in the Ohio State game, but he had an injury, and then a few, the rest of them opted out during the Alabama game. But it helped Michigan because some of those younger players were able to step in and really show their worth. But let's go back to the beginning. So the investigation into the Michigan Wolverines football team for alleged sign stealing, known as Signalgate, became public in October 2023. This followed reports that a low-level staffer, Connor Stalions, had orchestrated a scheme involving in-person scouting and filming opponents' signals, violating an NCAA bylaw prohibiting off-campus in-person scouting. Stalions was suspended by the school in October 2023 and later resigned. On November 10th, 2023, the Big Ten Conference suspended coach Jim Harbaugh for the rest of the 2023 regular season after finding Michigan violated the conference's sportsmanship policy with a impermissible in-person scouting operating over multiple years. Central Michigan University also became involved in the investigation due to potential off-campus scouting violations by Stalions. And of course, that was he had the sunglasses on and the baseball cap and was sitting on the sidelines. And I believe it was confirmed it was him today. I think I saw something floating around that it may have been him. So after all that fight, it turned out to be him. But that's important because that plot right there, that was when all the Michigan players went to Twitter and they wrote bet because they were on an airplane on their way to the Penn State game, a top 25 showdown in a hostile environment, and they received news that their coach is not going to be on the sidelines with them, and Sherrone Moore would take over as the head coach. And they go into Penn State and they actually ran the ball probably like 80% of the game. That was a huge game for Blake Corum. And they went on and beat Penn State on their home turf. And then the next week they also have Sherrone Moore coaching, no Harbaugh again, and they beat Ohio State when Rod Moore has that historic and legendary interception right in front of Marvin Harrison. And then, of course, they go on the run. They end up beating Alabama in the Rose Bowl. And then in the national title game, they beat Washington. Excuse me, I was about to say Wisconsin. But it continued after the season. So that was fun because, Harbaugh got his glory. He finally got his championship. He could go, run off into the sunset and, go finally decide to coach in the NFL because the rumors were circulating for the past several seasons that he was a potential fit for several, NFL organizations. And, he decided to go to the Chargers. He's now in the AFC West coaching Justin Herbert and his crew and trying to bring them back to their glory days. But he accomplished what he wanted. He got to say, "Bring it down." I forget the exact quote, but he was very happy, to be able to check that off. That was the final box that he wanted to check off. And Sherrone Moore was hired as the head coach, and Michigan was able to do their victory lap and all through January, and then they actually held on to a majority of their roster. I would say the biggest name that left when the news kept on coming out about like what was the possibility of this, or the possible future of this organization. And I would say the biggest name was Keon Sabb when he went to Alabama. And I contribute that to mostly money. I think Alabama came in with an offer and Sabb was happy to take it, but I do think Sabb liked his time with Michigan. He was in line to start in the secondary. So, no harm there. The NCAA continued the investigation and sent Michigan a formal notice of allegations in August 2024, listing 11 violations. And I believe 6 of them were, what are they called, tier 1 or something like that, which that was the big red flag right there. Michigan disputed the charges, calling the NCAA sanctions grossly overreaching. In May 2025, Michigan self-imposed a 2-game suspension on offensive coordinator Sherrone Moore for deleting text messages with Stalions. The NCAA announced penalties against Michigan on August 15th, 2025, and we already read you the penalties. I don't know if we have to read them again. I think there's some nuggets that we could go through. Why the NCAA did not vacate Michigan's wins, and Ross Dellinger tweeted this. He kind of recapped it. The NCAA committee member says that is twofold. One, there was no ineligible athletes competing, and 2, the NCAA took very quick action in alerting the Big Ten to the investigation, which resulted in Jim Harbaugh's in-season suspension. And I don't know if people remember, but about a month ago, the Big Ten came out and said that Michigan has been punished enough in some ways. I believe the NCAA commissioner, even after their national title game, and I know people are going to dispute this because other information has since came out, but he said it was legit, that championship. And I don't know how much you can take away from what Michigan accomplished during that run. Maybe in some ways people can say how they built up to that, if you really want to go by the signal gate, and how it factored into recruiting and how it made them a winning program again, even though they had success under Harbaugh, they just couldn't win the big game with him. And then all of a sudden they're beating teams like Ohio State and some of the top tier teams like Iowa and Michigan State every year, and Wisconsin's of the world, and whoever else you look, Penn State, whoever you look at as a big name Big Ten program. Of course, Oregon and Washington, they didn't enter the discussion yet. It wasn't until last year when they joined the conference. But there's a few things I wanted to point out. For starters, they had 13 players drafted in the 2024 draft. And that was a school record. I believe Ohio State broke it this year. I could be wrong in saying that, but there were 13 players drafted. And then you come back and you kind of think about this year, there was 3 first-round picks: Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, Colston Loveland. And then I wholeheartedly believe Will Johnson should have been drafted in the first round, but because he was kind of nursing an injury, he wasn't drafted, and some people shied away from him. But overall, you got to think about it. You had your quarterback drafted in the first 10 picks by the Minnesota Vikings, who have a quarterback-minded head coach there, and then they have more talent leaving after this season, 8-5 season, and I think that speaks a lot to who Michigan was as a program and just how dominant they were, because the talent on the field, there was a lot of it. And they developed a lot of those talents, because I think there was a long stretch where Michigan wasn't getting the the consistent high tier 4-star recruits and the 5-star recruits. Let's go through the 2024 draft here. I was pulling it up for a second. J.J. McCarthy was round 1, like I said, a top 10 pick. And then Chris Jenkins goes 49th overall. Mike Sanistro, who's just lighting it up in the NFL for the Commanders, and started out his college days as a wide receiver. He went 50th overall, right behind Chris Jenkins. And then Junior Colston, who started since his freshman year at Michigan, ninth overall in the third round. Blake Corum was right behind him in the third round at 83 overall, who, if he didn't have a all-pro running back in front of him, he probably is starting. But, he's a great serviceable second on the depth chart type running back. Roman Wilson, and he went to the Steelers at 84th overall, so back to back there. And the Steelers were so desperate to get a second receiver in their wide receiver room behind George Pickens, and they looked at Roman Wilson as that guy. And of course, he had his troubles last season. There was an injury to start, and then the Steelers just kind of shelved him for the rest of the season. But I think they're going to give him a shot this year, and he has Aaron Rodgers thrown to him. Zach Zinter, who was the offensive lineman who got injured in the Ohio State game. The Browns, took a chance on him in the third round at 85 overall, hoping that he would come back to full health. And you saw how much the Michigan players loved him. And that next play was electric when Blake Corum took it to the house. It was awesome to see. And then A.J. Barner, the tight end, who's split time with Colston during his final season, was drafted by the Seahawks in the fourth round. And he went to a familiar face in Mike McDonald, who was the former defensive coordinator for Michigan right before Jesse Minter. Trevor Keegan was the fifth round, 172 overall. Michael Barrett, who's just a beloved linebacker from Michigan, seventh round, 240th overall. So they had a few seventh round picked. Ladarius Henderson, 249th overall in the seventh round. Jalen Harrell, who I believe the Titans really like, actually, 252nd overall. And then Cornelius Johnson went to his old head coach in Harbaugh to the LA Chargers. So a lot of talent was picked. There was a few players who decided to go into the draft, didn't get drafted, but they signed as, free agents. That was a talented team. And just think about the coaching staff too. The people who followed Harbaugh to the Chargers, the strength and conditioning coach that they had and was beloved. I mean, Jesse Minter's already looked at as a top defensive coordinator in the NFL, and I think he's going to be a head coach one day. If it's not in the NFL, he'll be a head coach in college football. So just watch out for him. And I mean, Mike McDonald was right before that, and he was with the first Big Ten championship team, and he's a head coach already for the Seahawks. Went back to the Ravens and, paved his way. And now you think about who's the head coach of Michigan it's Sherrone Moore. So that was a talented coaching staff, and I'm not even talking about Jim Harbaugh yet. The day that Harbaugh had a press conference saying that he was coming to Michigan, that was one of the happiest days of my life. Just what he did at Stanford, and then he went to the 49ers, and it was just instant success for them. And then he decided to come back to college football and come back to his home school in Michigan, where he had his glory days in the 80s, and just such a great football mind, such a unique and favorable personality. I don't know how so many people can hate him and just dismiss the success that he's had over the years. It's been so much. It's hard to watch, like, how his name's just been kind of dragged through the mud in the college football circuits. But I'm happy to see that the NFL still loves him. A lot of the media channels still love him. I know he goes on Pardon My Take a lot. So, do I think there was any wrongdoing? I don't know. I don't know what the extent of what Connor Stalions did for that Michigan team. That's up for your opinion. If you think that it's tainted, like Peter Burns says today, then by all means say that. But if you want to actually look at, in my opinion, the truth and just how talented that team was, then you have every right to do that as well. But I think the biggest win, other than being able to keep this championship, and this is the Michigan has the most wins in college football history. This is the most historic program out there. Is that the current players get to focus on football, and there's a lot of talent that's on this roster this year, and I'm really excited. And I'm going to talk about it more eventually, but just like outside of Bryce Underwood coming in, and the way that people talk about him, they're saying he's like one of the best freshmen they've seen in a while. And I think he's going to make his place from week one. But Justice Haynes from Alabama coming in to form a two-headed attack with Jordan Marshall is something to be really excited about. The most underrated player in college football, Max Bredesen, coming back this season. He's been one of my favorites for several seasons now, just because of what he stands for and how he plays on Saturdays. Marlon Klein, Hogan Hansen, Zach Marshall, three great tight ends and I'm not even talking. They have four great tight ends actually, but those are the three that are the top three on the depth chart. I mean, the tight end position's going to be fine this season, even without Colston Loveland, who's was another one of my favorites. Donovan McCulley coming in. A lot of people have been raving about him. And then it's up for grabs. It's really up to Samaj Morgan, Frederick Moore, Jamar Browder, Channing Goodwin, Anthony Simpson, Andrew Marsh, who's a freshman, Peyton O'Leary, who I thought was a tight end originally, but he's being listed as a receiver. Like someone has to step up and try to take that position outside of McCauley, who's already got the number one, the heavily coveted number one. He's number one on his jersey, I should say, which has always been given to some of the top Michigan receivers. I think of the Braylon Edwards days when he was given number one. But yeah, offensive line, people are saying could be a question. Who's going to win it? Andrew Sprague, I'm excited about. I hope the freshman, and I'm probably going to say his name right because I haven't heard it during live games yet, but Andrew Babalola. I mean, he was a five-star recruit. I'm very excited about him. Greg Crippen has apparently already won the center position. Giovanni El Hadi has already won the left guard position. Evan Link seems to have the lead at the left tackle position, but even that's still a fight. On defense, I think this is going to be the same defense as usual. Sean Benny. I mean, they just brought in Trey Williams. They just brought in Damon Payne. Trey Pierce at D tackle. I mean, Derek Moore's back. Barham's back, who's just a stud. Ernest Hausman, one of the fastest players out there, is back. Cole Sullivan's been apparently opening some eyes. TJ Guy, Dominic Nichols, I'm excited about. I mean, Jair Hill, I think he'll get drafted early next year, probably top 3 rounds. Hillman, Jaden Mangham, Mason Curtis, who's really stepped it up at the end of the last season and was great in the bowl game against Alabama. Zeke Berry was fantastic all last season. TJ Metcalf, he's one of the brothers that came in and transferred here. This is going to be a team that, even with their schedule, they'll be able to do some good things this year, and they're a talented group. So I'm excited. I'm excited about the season. I'm happy that these sanctions are behind Michigan. Now they can just focus on football. I have a feeling some of the Ohio State fans and Michigan State fans will still sit there and try to discredit everything and bring it up every chance that they have. But I mean, it's going to be answered on the playing field this year. It was answered, in Columbus last season, and now Ohio State has to come to Ann Arbor again. So it should be a good season for college football. But that's my recap. I got a little excited at the end and talked about this upcoming season, but for the most part, in my opinion, and of course, I'm wearing my Michigan shirt and been a lifetime Michigan fan, so you can take my opinion with a grain of salt if you want to, but I don't think extreme penalties would have solved anything here. And I think whatever was given out was appropriate, a fine, suspension, and let's just move forward with it. But new episodes should be out, if not this week, early next week. We're going to continue with our NFL previews. We're going to start talking college football a little bit. So, join us for the ride. We'll see you soon.